Good morning, Agape.
Good morning.
So I'm interested, are there any of you who will be hearing Dr. Shefali speak this morning for the first time? Wonderful, wonderful. You're in for such an important, powerful message, and I'm so honored to be introducing her this morning. Dr. Shefali is a New York Times best-selling author of the books The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family. She's also a renowned clinical psychologist, and I think that Oprah says it best. She said, in the 30 years that I've been doing interviews, Dr. Shefali is the best. And we are very fortunate to have her here this morning. For me, Dr. Shefali has an uncanny ability. She has a laser-like focus to focus in on the truth of these universal principles, these ancient wisdom principles that we teach and learn about here at Agape. So she speaks our language. I think that you will find her very familiar in her languaging. When I first met her, I was talking to her about my own son, whom I was getting calls from his teachers, plural. He can't sit in his seat like everyone else can. He can't focus like everyone else can. We think he has ADD. We think he has ADHD. And when I was speaking to Dr. Shefali about how to best support him, she said these 6 words to me. There's nothing wrong with your son. I evolved into the mother who could create that environment for the son where there is nothing wrong with. Lastly, I just want to say we're fortunate that Dr. Shefali, she lives on the East Coast. We're fortunate that she's going to be back with us September 15th through 17th at her conference called Evolve, the Conscious Way Summit. Reverend Michael is going to be speaking there as well. And after service today, she's going to be doing a book signing. And I invite all of you to please come speak to her and to a number of us who can tell you more about the summit, because it's an opportunity to have a weekend up close and personal, intimately learning from the best of the best. Thank you.
Because if I was just to say I was honored to be here, I would not be speaking the entire truth. I had to remember some SAT words to further express my appreciation, gratitude, being absolutely beholden by you. So thank you for having me. So there were these spate of terrorist attacks in 2008 that overtook and deluged my birth city of Mumbai, India, and covered the nation in terror. I remember a year later watching an interview which focused on one of the terrorists. And because it was my city where I was born, I took this interview very personally, as would you. And with the righteous indignation of one who fully believes she is right if she opposes hate. And even if she spews violence at hate, she's still justified. I put on that TV with a ferocity and the naivety of a young adult. What I expected to see was a human akin to a monster, some froth, some fangs, something ominous, so that I could project with further justification and righteousness my ignorant antipathy. But what I saw instead of anyone threatening was really a skeleton of a human being divested of spirit. The person before me really, and as much as I tried to garner and fester in the wounds that I thought I needed to be in order to have a reaction against his reaction, so there could be some justified quid pro quo and my world would then come back to equanimity, I just couldn't. Because what I saw before me was someone deeply severed from his heart. one who even was evoking compassion within me. But how could this be? This was the vehicle through which death had occurred. So now, how can I do the opposite of what is expected from me from mainstream? Culture dictates, it even allows us to succumb to violence and hatred if it was first struck at us. So I was confused and ambivalent, and I was suppressing the compassion that was coming. But then I realized that I was fighting against my divine nature only because I was bearing witness to one who had lost his. So here was a man who, if he had been in his heart, because the heart space understands oneness very well and clearly and never forgets, but if he had been in that heart, then none of this. So something had happened to him, you see, which we forget about, because human nature is so conveniently indulgent of lays and comfort that all we fixate on is the outcome, because who can bother to figure out how and why and to go back? No, let's just figure out what was done to us, make it personal, radicalize it, and then react to it. But if I pondered a second to how this came to be, that this boy came to incur on us and embody within himself such hatred, then I would come to the insight that it was him who had been done to. The crime had been done to him. Because his mind, you see, was not his. He had given it up to a brainwashing and a conditioning that was toxic. So he was actually plagued with the mental illness. It was him who was trapped and encaged. And then, of course, when one is in the cage, everything outside can be devoured. So he, you see, was not the one I needed to rail against. He was the afflicted. The one or the thing or the entity against whom, if any, I needed to have a railing or a protest or take arms toward. It was to be the affliction. And the affliction not only lies in him, lies in all our minds. Because the affliction of separatism, xenophobia, fear, duality, comes from a very, very insidious place, which is why I do the work I do. It comes from us, the parent. If you are a parent or you had a parent, you know what I'm talking about. I thought I was absolved of an ego or any sort of dominance or hierarchy in my mind because I had been meditating for 2 decades. So I thought I would spare my child. So I thought maybe I could go ahead and have one. If there was a qualification, surely I had met it. And while she was miraculously being harmonized and synchronized within, I knew that this wasn't my doing, but culture said it was. So for that moment, I chose to believe culture, because culture says we create our children. And I'm like, no, but this, I'm not synchronizing the beautiful display and the harmony of the way her body is manifesting. But culture says I am. And all the books say that she's yours. So for a moment, I indulged the monster of the ego. And I used to imagine, you know, the sun would dapple through the windows, and she and I would sit, she 2 years old and already a genius, and we would paint these miraculous collages, which would be sold at phenomenal prices. And then I would catch my ego and go, no, you know better. You've been a psychologist and a meditator. So then I would let it go. But then by the age of 4 or 5, the ego is always hiding behind, just under or within or sneaking, just waiting for the right moment of vulnerability. You know, the fingers wait on the keyboard to type something on Facebook. I mean, you have to like hold your hands back, right? And then at 4 or 5, I would imagine other things, you know, more humble things, like my child would say, no, I don't want to go to Disneyland. Let's go to the Louvre, and let's admire art because art is the language of the soul. And the fingers would itch to type and post our Johns at the Louvre, which we never have been to yet. But and then the imagination keeps soaring. And then if nothing worked out, 2 didn't work out, 4 didn't work out, but the fantasies prevail because we're imaginative creatures. And the ego roars louder and louder as the fantasies shatter. So by 12, I said to myself, it's okay if nothing worked out. I'm giving her time to unfold. I would go to the Zen state when things weren't working out. And then at the age of 12, I would imagine that my child would come home and sleep so late, but not because she was partying or doing drugs or booze, because she had been volunteering. And I would beg her, stop, you need to stop. You need to think of yourself. I say this, and today my daughter's at a music festival, probably getting a little high on something. So when the ego roared in my body, despite decades of sitting on the mat and thinking I was so zen, I began to wonder the insidious thought, could it be roaring in every parent? And shouldn't this be talked about? And maybe this is the cause of all chaos and toxicity and illness. But who can talk to a parent? I mean, if you're a parent, no one is more defensive than you. And I needed to earn a living, so I was like, should I really change the world or just be lucrative? But then there's an ego in changing the world too, So I went for it. And so it was that I began my journey to teach parents, in all sincerity, because there's no one more insane than the parent. Or not the parent who's insane, the ego of the parent that's insane. And so began my journey to crumble this mammoth, this huge, huge insidious force. This is where the fangs and the froth is, really. This is the ominous threat that now I thought lay in this terrorist or this anti-this or this that. It was really in the ego of the parent. Because it is here, you see, in the dominant parenting paradigm, as it's done mostly everywhere, that parents are taught that this child is yours. And we've never really had anything till we had our children because we lost ourselves a long time ago. So we're waiting to own something closest to us in blood, not our spouse, because that came from a mother-in-law. So it has to be mine, you see, it has to be my blood. To countless parents and mothers who cannot have their own, I say, so it's so clear, adopt. No, but it's not mine. So the insanity of our culture tells parents and endorses, challenges. How are you raising your child? What is she going to do? And there begins not only this vast terrain now of eternal ownership over your child, then there are books on how to control them and how to fix them. A book for every infliction they occur and incur on you is their fault. That's how we therapists stay in business. We give you the illusion there's something to be fixed, but it takes a long time, a lot of sessions. So I had to dare to send parents away, because as they'd leave their children and go have their Starbucks and get a manicure, and I would say, no, this is your time and your session. But no, but it's Johnny, but it's Alfred, how is it me? And I would say, it's all you. And Johnny can actually go and indulge and have a brain fart on his iPad, because it's so you that even that's okay. And parents would rail and defy and cower, because to see themselves in the mirror as the cause of the hierarchy and separatism and fear that we currently see in the macro world was too hard a truth to stomach. But slowly, one parent at a time, one chapter of a book at a time, parents began to understand that unless they not only within themselves topple all paradigms of separation, judgment, shame, discipline. And unless they realized that they needed to discipline themselves, and if they needed to resist anything within the child, they first needed to resist it within themselves. And if there was any reaction to be had against the child, it needed to be against their own ignorance. And if there was anything to be fixed within the child, it first needed to be fixed in their own inner childhood legacies. And slowly, parents began to understand how they themselves had been victim to a conditioning of the mind that was deeply ill and diseased. This is why they came from power and control. This is why you and I do that. We react out of fear because this is our conditioning, because we've forgotten our true nature, our true divine nature, which just only takes witnessing of nature to realize. You sit by a river and watch a river. Watch a river, how it flows in its flow, downstream, always around and over the boulder, never resisting it, always finding a way, the path of least resistance. And with divine, acute, precise, engineered intelligence, the nature around it speaks to it. The mountains say, come river, come water, etch into me, I will move. I will not only move, I will succumb and allow. And you can etch your way through, and maybe the magnificence of a Grand Canyon will be created by us. But the river and the water doesn't only display acts of aesthetic beauty. Sometimes rivers maraud and drown and tsunami and flood. And then we call them natural disasters, even though if we were slightly intelligent, we'd realize it was all man-made. But because, again, we're ignorant and lazy and only comfortable in the easy answers of life, we only look at the outcome of the tsunami, the devastation to man. But if the tsunami could speak, the tsunami would say, no, I've been created over generations, eons, decades, lifetimes. I've been interacting with you. And just like Surah, the pointillist, with his genius laser focus, makes masterpieces, but it takes so much time, but we only see the end result. So it is with things like terrorism or tsunamis. We only see the end, and then we only react to the end. But if you really want ignorance to end, you have to go to the cause. But the cause is never just one. The cause is infinitely complex, caused by other causes. This is what you see in nature, that it is interdependent. It is ceaselessly created through cause and effect. So to think that this is the cause and you feel so happy because you reached into your box of comfort because you found an answer is to be ignorant. Because that cause was caused by a million before. It's interdependent, ceaselessly, timelessly, limitlessly, expansively, exhaustively. So see, my SAT words are coming to good use. Poignantly intertwined. So to stop at one of the hooks in the vast chain is to be ignorant, is to be mentally diseased. You must understand it's cause and effect. Cause is effect. It's happening together synchronistically at the same time. That man who I went to work with the victims of the tsunami, though there are no victims, but the partners of the tsunami, and then I noticed this man who was inconsolable. And he talked to me about how he had helped build a colony across beautiful forested areas, and he was having a moment of insight, perhaps some guilt. He didn't know when he marauded the forest that perhaps with each laying of a brick for man, the ocean felt the crevice in the belly, deep within it, in its crannies. And there began the birth of the tsunami. But it was so long ago, who can remember? So it is, we must understand, take a pause from nature and learn how intricately interdependent everything is. Just like the belly for the child moves and creates this safe space and condition for the miracle of birth, in the same way that belly is part of nature, it's our mind that is man-made and diseased. So when people used to ask me, who will your daughter grow up to be? Who is she going to grow up to be at like 1? Or what does she do? She's a CEO, I used to say. So, the thirst, you see, these are parents at the playground who can't bear to see you happy and just swinging in the swing with your children. They must come and infect your mind with anxiety. What do you mean she does nothing? You know, she's 3 already. She should be a synchronized swimmer at least. And you're thinking to yourself, it's such a beautiful cloudless day. Why are you bothering me? You know why the other parent bothers you? Because they have been so infected by culture. And here you are, a happy parent, and they're like, no, you can't exist. Let me come and share some of my misery. Let me tell you how children should be. We shouldn't wait for them to unfold and enlighten themselves into their destiny, because that's just a straight linear path to homelessness. We must contour and micromanage, and you're a PhD, this can be your master's. You must spend a lot of time in producing this thing called a child so that they can grow up to be a successful adult, says the mother or the father who lays shrouded in his own shame of failure. Yeah? So the affliction is in our minds. The disease lies here. So to blame the afflicted is to participate in the disease. To not only participate, to encourage the disease. If you stay in the same vibrational space, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically, thinking you're actually going to devour them, thinking that you with your arms will be greater than their arms, makes logical sense, really. But in the wisdom, compassionate, big mind self, you know that that is ignorant, because when you stand in their space, you've given them your luminosity. Now you're reacting to them, and the minute you react to something, you give it legitimacy. But when you understand that it's deeply ill, therefore cannot be talked to, you see, there's no logic to it. It's illogical. It's against nature. So their separation and their fear and their isolation is because they've been disconnected from nature and their divine nature. So when you go and stay in their physical space or even spiritual, emotional space, you are now vibrationally allowing them to exist even more strongly. But you think that that's the way, because they attract you, you see, they seduce you, because they say you, and they point the finger and you think it's you, because you believe a you. You believe that it's a you, because you believe so much in your egoic possession over yourself. You believe you have a self. And so you believe the self can be attacked. All mental illness. Because there is no self. Because if you understood nature, you would understand everything is interdependently created. If everything is interdependently created, yourself is not absolute. Yourself is interdependent. So when someone says you, yeah, they mean a million you. So what are you going there to fight about? Take the million of you then. So you taking offense is you being part of the same delusion that you wish to end. So what do you do though? Because you want to do something. Because you feel the fury and you feel you must take action. Yes, action must be taken. But right action, illuminated action, enlightened action, not deluded action, which then further perverts the cause. Then you are one with them, you see. Because a unionized and a unified mind understands it will never play with madness. It will never play with delusion. It has transcended that life's energy. It won't even participate in the same area. Doesn't mean it will not have compassion. In fact, the greatest compassion is to leave it alone. Because when you leave something on its own, sometimes it just fades away. It dissipates. But the minute you go and interfere with it, you fire it up again. So a polarized mind is a diseased mind. A radicalized mind, a fundamental mind, is a mind that believes in the separation, first delusion, second delusion, between self delusion and other delusion, 3 delusions. There is no self, there is no other. But if you believe in the self, you quite logically believe in the other. So the root of the illness is in the belief of the self. Because if you don't believe in the self, because you realize it's interdependent, like the river and the mountain and the belly of the tsunami with man, everything is one, then you simply won't believe there's another. So this disease is what needs to be inoculated against and immunized and need antibiotics against. This is it. This is the cause of everything. So don't hate the afflicted. Heal the affliction within you. Unionize, unify. Each time you judge, each time you say my name, my house, my face, my family, my religion, my God. How can you say my to a God? How can you? They are antithetical to each other. It's dialectically opposed. You're reducing something which is evanescent and luminescent. Because so great is your narcissism that you must put the my before everything. And when you say my, you tell the other it's not yours. But I like you if it is. So here is where you need to take charge and dare to change the antipathy, the antagonism, and the hatred and the bigotry in your mind. Of course it doesn't show up as blatant racism. Of course it doesn't. But the seed of racism doesn't have to be against another. It can just be against an idea. It can just be against a behavior. It can just be against your child who contradicts your fantasy of who she should be. So unify your mind. When Mother Teresa was asked if she ever participates in anti-war protests, she said, no, you'll never find me there. But at the pro-peace rally, yes. So go create your own pro-peace. First, only be pro an ideal which is in alignment with divine nature. Don't be pro even a person, because when you're pro one person, you're automatically, insidiously, subliminally against another. Don't be pro anything. Just be pro the essential essence that is aligned with your divine nature. And when you do, then you will awaken to your presence. Thank you.